Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Ian Alexander Jr., the son of Academy Award-winning actress and director Regina King, took his life at the age of 26. Now, some are wondering why Ian Alexander Jr. would take his life when it's looking like he's at the peak of getting success as a musician and a chef. But when I take a critical examination of Ian Alexander Jr.'s suicide, it fits right in line for the pattern of men who are in crisis that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And your Ian Alexander Jr. possibly could have been a man in crisis for many years, and many people probably never saw the issues that he was dealing with. Now, on the surface, your Ian Alexander Jr. looked like he had everything going for him. Last year, he had released his first single, and earlier this year, he released a second single. So it looked like he had a lot of success going for him, but maybe he was possibly suffering in silence as related to dealing with several unresolved issues in his personal life, and he might have been dealing with some issues as related to his family life, because in 2007, Regina King divorced the Ian Alexander Jr.'s father, Ian Alexander Sr., and sometimes a lot of boys, they don't really know how to deal with divorce because it really devastates them to see their parents separate like this, and sometimes they don't really talk about the issues as related to the divorce because a lot of times the boy is still trying to work those issues out. Now, 2007 was 15 years ago or 16 years ago, and your Ian Alexander Jr. was 16 years old. And at that age, you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, and sometimes you're trying to figure out if your parents are divorcing, if you possibly could have had something to do with it, because a lot of boys, they try to process and try to figure out what happened between their parents, and that could have possibly been one of the things that led to Ian Alexander Jr. winding up suffering in silence, is him having to deal with those unresolved issues as related to the divorce of his parents. But they say that he was still close to his mother, and a lot of men in crisis, they have issues again, and they struggle with these issues, and they struggle with these issues in silence because they're afraid to come out here and ask for help. Because what leads to a lot of men in crisis going out here and taking their lives is that they're trying to figure out how to make something work, or they're trying to resolve some issue in their lives, and because they cannot find a person to talk to or find a safe place where they can discuss these unresolved issues, a lot of these men, they sit there and they suffer in silence. They sit there and try to work these issues out inside of their own heads. They try to come up with answers for this problem, only discussing it with themselves, and they go around and around with that same issue over and over again. And then because they can't figure out an issue, they feel like there is no hope. And this is what leads to many men who are suffering in silence going to the extreme of taking their lives. And that could have possibly been why your Ian Alexander Jr. possibly could have taken his life, because he didn't feel like he could go out here and talk to anyone about what was bothering him, because he never felt like there was a safe environment. Now, a lot of men, a lot of them don't feel like talking about certain issues because people will think that there's something wrong with them or that they're thinking that they're weak. But there is nothing weak about going out here and asking for help, because people who truly love people and care about them, they're going to go out here and try to want to help that person be able to deal with what they're dealing with. And your Ian Alexander Jr. probably felt like, oh, I've got all of this success as a chef, I've got all of this success as a musician and a DJ. Why should I go out here and tell people that I'm not really feeling well or as related to my mental health, and go out here and seek out that mental health, that help that he needs? Because in the black community, we have a serious problem as related to stigmatizing people with issues as related to mental health. We just go out here and dismiss many of the issues people are having as related to mental health. We sit there and say, oh, you can go out here and go and pray that demon away. Some people say that all you need is Jesus and Oprah. But when it comes to mental health, this is something that people in the black community sadly don't take seriously, but we really need to take it seriously, because that's one of the reasons why a lot of black people, especially a lot of straight black men, suffer in silence, because we dismiss the issue of mental health and we just take it like, oh, that's just the way he is. But this person could be getting help if they had a supportive environment where they were told that you're not a bad person because you're struggling with things, or we're trying to stigmatize you for going out here and dealing with some issues that you need to resolve with a mental health specialist like a psychotherapist or a psychologist. And that's possibly what Ian Alexander desperately Jr. needed. He needed the help of mental health professionals. Sadly, he probably felt there would be a negative stigma with all of this success that he was having if he went out here and sought that help. But it's not any sign that things are going bad when you go out here and seek that kind of help. It actually is a sign that you are strong, because you are acknowledging that there is a problem and you need to go out here and get help for that problem you're dealing with. This is another problem that America's men have to really work on, is understanding that it's not a bad thing to say that I want to go out and get help for mental health issues, because the faster you go out here and get counseling as related to dealing with your mental health, the faster you can start resolving your issues and you can start healing as related to dealing with your mental health. And your mental health is something you have to really put first as when you're taking care of yourself, because if your mind isn't right, the rest of your life isn't going to be right. And that's what I think about as related to Ian Alexander Jr., this young man who had so much promise. His mind wasn't in the right place, and because his mind wasn't in the right place, he possibly thought everything was hopeless, or he probably felt overwhelmed by all of this success, and that was making him feel, as related to his mental health, that things would be hopeless in some way. And that's one of the other reasons why men who have success take their lives, because nobody is there to really give these guys the mental health counseling that they need to let them understand that those feelings of anxiety and feeling somewhat overwhelmed, that is perfectly normal, but you have to get control of yourself, because yes, things are going well and it's feeling like a big wave overtaking you, but understand that God is in control. And when you understand that God is in control, then you can let things go. And a lot of guys who are they're men, they're looking like they're doing well on the outside, but they're struggling as related to mental health issues on the inside. And this is another part of America's man crisis that's going on that many people don't want to talk about, is how a lot of men, they feel deeply troubled and they feel overwhelmed And this is one of the things that drives a lot of men to take their own lives, because they don't feel like they can talk about these issues, and they don't feel like it's manly to talk about these issues. But it takes a great man of character to go out here and acknowledge these issues, and we need to give those kind of men support, because the more support we give these men, the faster we can go out here and get them help and keep them from becoming men in crisis and men who suffer a great tragedy where they wind up taking their lives, like Ian Alexander Jr. did, and a family losing its only son. Now, if you want to learn how to deal with these kind of issues that lead to men, again, taking their lives, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find it on Smashwords, the iBook store, and Google Play. And this book has helped so many men in crisis move their lives forward, and it has helped a lot of men understand how to deal with certain issues. And I wrote an entire chapter in this book, Suicide and the Man Crisis, because I saw so many men out here who were contemplating suicide and thinking about taking their lives. And that was one of the chapters I wrote, because I see so many men in crisis, like Ian Alexander Jr., and I really want to see those men be able to start to see the value in their own lives, see some hope as related to their situation, and really start working on the road to healing and moving their lives forward. So the man crisis, it's a major problem here in America, and it's one that is sadly getting worse instead of better. And I really want to see more men going out here and getting the help that they need, because a lot of our men, they are in crisis, and sadly we don't know that they're in crisis until it's too late. And I would love to see more men out here realize that they need to go out here and overcome the tragedy, overcome the issues in their lives, so that they won't become in crisis and their family won't have to suffer their loss. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.